All right. First of all, I actually do want to say welcome to everyone. Most importantly, I want to acknowledge our actual panelists, and you'll actually find out how incredible these women are. They're humans from all over the world who genuinely are living a very conscious life. So let me actually start by just introducing them by name, and they will actually share with you a little bit of their story before we start today. So we have Concepción Gaxiola, Bridget Cook-Burch, Diana Dixon, Wendy Keller, and Bianca Stawiarski. So today, the actual theme is really about bringing people together to really look at how we go from awareness to action as a conscious leader in this incredibly complex world that we are living in. The focus is to actually bring people together from all parts of the world, different professions with one point of unity, and that is to actually live consciously, not just in the work that we do, but also how we actually choose to lead and how we form connections and relationships. We are more importantly here to have a conversation, and it's not to persuade you. We want to actually look at not arriving at any one answer. We just want us to actually listen, to reflect, and to become more curious about what else might actually be possible in the world and how we can create a ripple effect. So over these 3 sessions, with today being the first one, our panelists have actually come together from different professions, and that actually is including publishing, education, health, human rights, child protection, well-being, finance, technology, and AI. I also want to take a moment just to actually acknowledge the wisdom that actually exists, or has existed, I should say, long before modern systems. Wisdom actually held by elders and cultures who understood connection, balance, harmony, and responsibility in ways that we're actually only beginning to remember. This is what Conscious Minds Unite to Ignite is all about. So for me, my journey actually down this path started about a decade ago in a very remote place in Tanzania with my then 17-year-old daughter. And what actually began as her experience then actually became my deeper awareness. It was actually quiet, but confronting questions that actually chose or maybe allowed me to choose who I wanted to become. That actual question actually led me to step away from certainty in a successful career to actually look at being more conscious in the way that I actually chose to live and lead. It asked me to recognize my privilege, to examine my bias, and to question the very systems that I actually once moved in without fully really understanding the contributions that I was actually making. Now, each of the panelists, they've actually arrived here through their own lived experiences and their own turning points. They've all had different paths, different perspectives, but they actually share a willingness to pause, to choose to live with intention, and to be more conscious. The world has changed. We're all actually feeling it, yet many of our conversations haven't changed. Today is an invitation to begin to actually think differently, to be curious, and to talk about consciousness not as an idea, but as something lived. In the way that we lead, the way that we listen, and the way that we actually are open to differences. So as I begin, I want to welcome our actual panel so that they can actually share a little bit of their story before we begin the conversations. So welcome back, ladies. So Concepción, I might actually start with you, if you don't mind just actually introducing yourself and giving us a bit of a background.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Cathy. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm just so delighted to be with these lovely women on this panel, speaking about our favorite subject, conscious leadership. Again, my name is Concepción Gaxiola, and I am the Executive Director for Age Africa. We are a nonprofit organization that runs programming in Malawi for girls and helping them build their agency and being able to move forward and making their own life choices to move on from secondary school to university to other pathways that exist for them to be successful. Along the way, I have been doing this now for almost 9 years, but I've been involved with Age Africa much longer. But really, my deep passion comes from being able to see how I can be helpful and supportive as just a person showing up and being able to. One of the things I like to say is I want to be a helper all the time. So it's very exciting to be in the work that I'm in and being able to live my truth and be able to carry that forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Concepcion. We might go across to Bridget. Bridget, do you mind just giving your background?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm so delighted to be here, ladies, and for anyone that is joining us. I do feel like this topic is needed so deeply in the world, and we're all coming tonight and today, depending on where you are in the world, with our different ideas and turning points. But I would love to say that I'm in a world where I am informed by story, captured by story, embroiled into story, and love to see the rise out of story into something even greater. I think that's where consciousness takes us. And so, in my early work, I was working with gang kids and others who lived life in a box, and what their mom and dad were gang members, and grandma and grandpa and others, until someone loved them enough to show them a different way. And when I saw this breakthrough in their lives, it just made me fall in love with the human soul. It brought me into writing people's actual stories. Got a lot of my stories on Oprah and Dr. Phil and CNN and Dateline and Paramount Plus, things like that. And it's not, I get emotional because it's not about, oh, look at all that and we're all a bag of chips. It's the power of story to change the world. And I get to be in the thick and see this happen and people transform their lives. And as they begin to look at their own lives differently, their own stories differently, then they become more conscious to be able to make further decisions. So that's my background. I get to help people write stories, publish stories, and it's a very exciting work to be involved in. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Diana, we'll go across to you.
Well, Diana Dixon, I am the owner and founder of Dixon Co. Creative Agency and also the founder of a nonprofit called Change Make Hers, which is all about women helping each other rise. So speaking of storytelling, I'm a storyteller and my team, we're storytellers and telling those smaller stories to make an impact in the world for brands. So we're telling brand stories and bringing those to life the best way possible. And using our mindfulness in marketing is really important for us as we know how the way we approach the storytelling affects how other people perceive it and their place in the world as well. So it's really, I'm really excited to be here today with all of these lovely and amazing women on this panel and excited to share more about our story for Dixon Co. and Changemakers.
Thank you, Diana. Wendy, we'll go across to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Cathy. Nice to be here with all of you. And thank you to those who are listening live and those of you who will listen on replay. I am a literary agent. I started my life as a journalist, and then life sort of shunted me into this wonderful path of helping people get their nonfiction books published, and then all the wonderful things that can happen in their careers as a result of that experience. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little weird. I I was raised in a cult. My parents joined a cult when I was 6. And from that moment forward, I was told, this is what you're supposed to believe. This is how you believe. This is what we believe. This is the only thing to believe. And as a child growing up, I started asking questions. And I think that's what led me to journalism, where I could go in and actually ask someone for their point of view and the way they saw the world. And the process of putting together a story and bringing different viewpoints, like Cathy's doing live here, is what a journalist does when they're assembling a story or a book. And then I eventually moved into the beauty of helping others and myself. I'm the author of 31 published books by publishers, not God knows how many self-published books I've written, but by publishers, there are 31 of them under 9 different names. But the interesting thing about publishing is that you get to tell the long version instead of a couple sentences that you get in an article. And I find it really interesting. I would say my entire life has been motivated by one quote from Lord Byron, which basically summarizes how much power there is in a drop of ink to actually make thousands, perhaps millions of people think. You may be familiar with the whole poem, but it is such a powerful thing to be able to even have the option of listening to different points of view, learn something new, take what works, leave what doesn't. I think that's been an incredible experience in my life and career so far. And yes, I left the cult when I was 26. Thank you for including me in this program.
Thank you, Wendy. And Bianca, can I actually ask you to share your story?
Sure. Brani Mata. Brani Mata means, hey, how you going in my Buddy Maya language. So I'm a Buddy Maya and Ukrainian woman. Buddy Maya is Australian First Nations from Western Australia, but I live here on gorgeous Kaurna country in South Australia. Just over 11 years ago, I had a change in life. I went from over 2 decades in the Commonwealth Government, working with community, and doing great things that I believed in, but I knew that I wanted to do something different. So I started my business, Warrada Holistic Wellness. Warrada means wedge-tail eagle in Buddy Maya, and it's like my family's totem. When we see Warrada, we know we're on the right path. I generally work with women in helping them heal. I'm a certified mental health clinician, clinical counsellor, and Indigenous healing practitioner. And it's about that sort of walking alongside someone, heart to heart led. All of you were talked about stories. We learn in story, we heal in story. And Wendy, your comment was really interesting in the sense I support women that have come out of that have been bred into cults, been bred into child sexual abuse and pornography and things like that, which requires you to be able to listen to some stories that it maybe not, that other people can really hold. So for me, it's about country. For me, it's about utilising land. When we say country, includes spirit. It's not just land. Trying to have to translate some things as well. And I also work with organisations and workplaces and government departments to change systems. So thinking about the trauma, why people aren't accessing services, what are the behaviours that people aren't recognising as trauma. I've also a PhD candidate. I'm looking at that sort of intersectionality between Aboriginal women's empowerment and entrepreneurship, and so that we don't necessarily have to talk about trauma. So I do a bit of, I play in the world and get to meet all these amazing women and empowered, incredible women doing the things that they want to do. And yeah, so I guess that's what I do. Mental health, well-being, but in a very different way, in the sense of I'm not the healed expert working with an unhealed, broken person. We're just 2 healed people walking together on a journey, and that's how I bring and what I bring to the world.
Thank you, Bianca. Do you know, I think as I sit here and listen to you, and I know each of you, I think the depth of who you actually are, you've shared part of that story here with us. And I think understanding story, which each of you have actually led with, is actually our way of, walking the path that we're actually here to walk. And so whilst you've shared a little bit of your background from a professional perspective, I want to actually say that I see you and I feel you, and that I am incredibly grateful, for you in being here today. And that's actually the same for all of those of you who are live, and for those of you who will be listening to. There is something that has led you here. And if I can share one thing, it is to actually encourage you to stay curious and to actually explore the potential of who you're here to actually become. So I have a series, 3 questions that I actually want to ask each of our panelists. And I might actually start with you, Bridget, in actually saying that, you shared a little bit of your story, but if I can ask, what was one moment or one experience or perhaps a realization that first shifted how you actually see your role, who you are in this world, and how did that change the way that you actually lead and show up? And this will be a question that I'm going to ask all of you, but Bridget, if you don't mind me actually starting with you.
Yeah, I don't mind. Thank you. It was a fascinating question because I think we all have certain experiences that if someone were to really know us, they would need to know this particular story or this particular aspect of us. And that beginning for me was quite a transition. It was different from Wendy's, but I was wounded as a young child. I was adopted, and I was adopted into an amazing family, just wonderful parents. But I carried this core wound of why wasn't I enough? Why wasn't I good enough or pretty enough or smart enough or whatever it might be in order for them to keep me? So there had to be something wrong with me. And then I spent much of my life, my early life, really trying to prove that I was worthy of something. And my early years in college, I ended up working 3 jobs, going to school, and at one point I was failing everything. And that failure was unacceptable and I couldn't stand it, and I was eating myself from the inside out, and I didn't even know it. I just knew that I got very ill at one point, and I went home to see my mother, and it was this oxymoronic moment because this is the woman that I wanted to please the most, to prove that, I was worthy and that I had something to offer, and I had to walk up to her door and knock on it. And a complete failure, failing in my relationships, failing in my grades. I had $5 that I put in from my tips the night before to get gas to go down the canyon, and I shouldn't have been driving. And she took one look at me and she said, "We're going to the doctor." And she put me right into her car, took me to the doctor's office where I collapsed. And luckily, it was right next door to the hospital, and they put me in for emergency surgery. And I had sepsis in my colon, like I had uh, ulcers and fissures in my colon. I literally was eating myself from the inside out, and I didn't know it. And the big turning point was I was in there for several days, but I wasn't getting better. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard nurses outside in the corridor saying, "She's not going to make it until morning."
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I suddenly had to face my own mortality. And I just remember being so sad because I knew I had not fulfilled the measure of my creation. Honestly, I had no idea what the heck that was, but I knew I hadn't done it. And so I was just overcome with this really deep sadness. And what was even more amazing was that I had a figure that came into my room, and the whole room was filled with light. and it was filled with so much unconditional love. Like I had been loved in my family, but I'd never experienced anything like this, like no conditions, any of these things. And I was told I was being given a second chance. And when I woke up in the morning, they were bringing in 6 or 7 more intravenous antibiotics. And I was able to say, whoa, wait a minute. This one is killing me. They said, what are you talking about? We thought we were going to lose you. These are the only things that are saving your life. And I said, not this one. And I could point to the exact one. And luckily, even though the nurse thought that I was a French fry shy of a Happy Meal, the doctor had had some experiences with other patients with near-death experiences. And he said, you know what, let's take her off this one and see what happens. And in 24 hours, I walked out of the hospital on my own power. And that was so undeniable. And the biggest thing was the story I had told myself before this. And then the story I began to tell myself after, and being able to listen to other people's stories and to recognize like the golden threads of their beliefs, but also I could see what was possible for them. That was a huge, huge turning point for me.
Having that sort of insight and the belief to actually speak up is just so powerful. And, you did it in a very vulnerable state. But it's also, I think, something that's really needed, in today. So thank you so much for sharing. All right, Diana, how about we skip across to you for this question?
Well, Bridget, thank you for sharing that really powerful story that gave me goosebumps. So profound. I don't know if my story will be as profound, but mine started off. I probably have many turning points in my journey, but I'm going to speak about my first turning point. From when I was younger, I actually was bullied as a child, and I think on some level that instilled this need in me to want to treat others like I wanted to be treated, which was with kindness and empathy, and fairness and equality. So, and during that time, I was bullied actually for being smart and setting the curve. I was, in a small town where they just really didn't see the value of having a girl, being smart and setting the curve. And for me, at that moment, I was learning that I was supposed to hide my gifts. And as I've gotten older, I really want to empower women to share their gifts with the world and to not shine, or not to hide, but to shine, right? That we should be shining and sharing those gifts. So as I've learned, I've been learning to use my voice because I'm also the youngest of 5 kids. So a big family in a small town where I didn't really have the power to use my voice. I had to be more of a follower versus a leader when I was growing up. And I actually, as I was older, I read a book called The Power of the Positive No by William Ury, which I highly recommend to everybody. But I was a born people pleaser through the culture that I grew up in. We're trying to be a perfectionism and, people pleasing and, getting a little bit of imposter syndrome. So as I was learning, also I became afraid of conflict. So by being afraid of conflict, I was afraid to actually say no to people and look out and set my boundaries that were important for me to set. So when you're trying to run a business, that's not actually, when you're so worried about everybody else's feelings, that's great that you want people to be happy, but not when it's to the detriment of your own happiness as well. Because when you're trying to people please and make everybody happy, you end up making nobody happy, including yourself.
Yeah.
So I learned through reading this book that it was about finding your why, how to be able to say no and have, not thinking of it as conflict, but actually like respectful, conscious communication with others to be able to set those boundaries and to say no because you had a bigger why to say yes to. And now I'm learning to use my voice, even when it shakes. But, and of course, we're all a work in progress, and learning to say that it's okay to not be perfect, but, just taking that step. Done is better than perfect. And that's where I've been learning to lead my company through that power of an intention and integrity that are really important to me, and treating others with that kindness and respect and the golden rule. I know my mom actually used to yell at us to behave in the back of the car and say, be nice, sweet, kind, and gentle. She was probably meaning it for us to like just behave. She might have been yelling it at the time, but it still resonates in my mind. She's unfortunately passed a long time ago from cancer, but it's still something that I carry with me is how I want to operate and show up in the world is to be nice, sweet, kind, and gentle and leave others better than we got them.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. See, I've known you for a while and I didn't know that about you.
Always theirs.
Yes, there's always more. Wendy, I might skip across to you.
Thank you. I've been listening to the beautiful and open-hearted shares of Bridget and Diana, and if you're in the audience and listening to this, you might be thinking, oh, well, the things that have happened to me aren't that big, or, oh, I had something bigger happen, or there's this sort of built-in comparison thing, especially, I think, in a different way with women, like, oh, well, let me tell you. And we sort of bat things back and forth, I've noticed, in general among humans. There's this sort of one upmanship on one woman upship. But what I really think I would like to share is that you're listening to this because you want something more from your life. And all we can do here is say, look, this, like Bridget does with her business, say, this is my story and these things happened. And because of that, I became a better and better person. And it really is only a collection. Your life will be forgotten in 100 years most of the time, and nobody's going to really care what your story was other than one sentence your great-grandchildren might read someday. And as real and tragic or exciting or dramatic or whatever it is to you, I think one of the biggest things we learn in life is to not be a victim. And in order to explain how deeply that one perception has affected me, I will tell you this brief version. When I was 26, my husband and I took our 2 children to England and for a trip. I was going to attend the London Book Fair, and my son was 4 and my daughter was 18 months old, and we were touring the Cotswolds. We'd been there before, and we were having this great day, and it was raining, and my husband had jet lag, and he didn't look both ways, and he pulled out in front of oncoming traffic, and a car hit us at 65 miles per hour. When I woke up a couple days later in the hospital with extraordinary life-threatening wounds, my daughter was dead and my son was dying. And this is an enormous tragedy because of our position, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of friends and people. And because I was in the media, there were all kinds of newspapers and magazines that picked it up, and people wrote letters, and they all had their own version of empathy or sympathy for what we went through. And that was very powerful, and it was life-changing, et cetera, all those things. However, you can go to kellermedia.com or wendykeller.com and read to your heart's content. However, what I want to say is the most important life-changing experience that came after that was when I was still in a wheelchair, because I didn't walk for about 1.5 years without pain for about 4 years. But when I was still in a wheelchair, somebody sent me to this support group at a hospital. And I'm in a wheelchair, so I'm lower than everybody else, or you're very short sitting in a wheelchair when people are talking to you. And there were these ladies who had these badges on, and they were the pictures of children. And eventually, after the couple hours, I figured out these were badges of their dead children. And like 5 out of the 20-something women in the room had these badges on. And there was this one lady who had a badge on, and I learned from her that she had 4 children subsequently to this baby who had lived for 1 day. He lived for 1 day in the 1970s. Her whole life, she was going to a grief support group 22 years later for this kid who had died. And I get that it's really sad and tragic. I've lost my own children. I get it. But really, that many years later, and the director, who was supposed to be the picture of mental wellness, her own child had died 18 years earlier, and she was still stuck in that blindness. She never stood up and said, I'm going to get through this no matter what it takes. And in that moment, after attending and listening to these women who had great lives, except all they could focus on was their loss, I said to myself, I'm not going to do this. This isn't going to be me in 5 or 10 or 20 years. I don't want this one terrible thing that happened to define who I am for the rest of my life. And I didn't. And I went on and I had a great career. And I had people who were friends for decades who never even knew about my loss unless they saw it covered on, it's been on a lot of TV shows. Other than that, there was no knowledge of it because I didn't want that to be the only defining thing. And as an agent, so many times people tell me, well, this is the one truth, or this is the moment when everything changed and then I became the most famous, wonderful person on earth. Like baloney. It doesn't work that way, but you do have to take what's going on for you and find a way through it because there's no way to hide it, avoid it, work around it, eat your way through it, exercise your way through it. You just have to steel your nerve and walk through whatever's happening to you right now and get to the other side. That's the only trick to the whole game, in my opinion, and in my experience. And I really would love that message to be heard by those of you who are on this call or listen to it later who are going through some really bad stuff right now. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Wendy. That is incredibly powerful. And it is actually about, you said it really eloquently.
Thank you.
It is one part of us, and what we choose to do, in that moment is actually a choice. And, you've actually heard, Bridget share one story about, her actual life and death moment. Diana's actually, shared others. I think most people experience some aspect of trauma, and it isn't about, mine is bigger, just like you said.
And you can choose to stop
it's a
or move
choice.
on. Look at, it's not a miracle skill. I didn't have any special skills. Most people don't. It's just a decision.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Concepcion, we might come to you.
Right. Thank you. And thank you, ladies, for sharing. That was very beautiful. And I'm just so grateful to just be in this space. I think there have just been many moments in my life in being able to be where I'm at today. And I think for myself in particular, and this is not something I had thought of until I heard you ladies speaking, is I'm first generation born here in the United States. I come from undocumented parents. I was born to undocumented parents who now have their citizenship. And my father passed, but that was his big, very happy to be there. And I think I've lived in two worlds my whole entire childhood. I was a good Latina daughter. I had to be a good Latina daughter at home, following making sure I do everything to be a good wife. And then when I walked out of my house, I had to be a good American girl. And I had to do all the things that American girls did because my parents reinforced over and over that I was born here and I needed to do better because the other kids spoke English at school and at home, and I only spoke it at school. So I spent my entire childhood trying really hard to not have an accent. And I say that now without embarrassment because I used to be embarrassed about it. But my mother was they just wanted me so badly to assimilate and to fit in. I went to a school where it was predominantly white at the time. But my parents moved into a neighborhood so that we could just make it to where I could go to this particular school because it was better than the schools that had gangs on the other side of the tracks, as I like to call it. And I think that that's just really shaped my decisions as I move forward because I'm able to live in two worlds and I know they call it code switching now, but I can go back and forth and just kind of trying to figure it out. And I think that has just given me so much awareness of what's happening around me and especially with other people. Sometimes I think that my empathy level is just so high that it might be toxic because I just don't know at what point I need to step back and it's not empathy anymore. Now I'm actually like a little too involved. But when I think about it now, I think about my parents coming to this country and how brave it must have been to come in your 20s with nothing and really to make something of yourself. And, I think about when I was in finance for about 10 years. I loved what I did. I was helping people realize their dreams of home ownership. And it was so touching just to like be able to call somebody like your loan closed, you closed escrow, go get your keys. But it wasn't enough for me. And I paused at one moment, and I had this wonderful woman who, I think the divine just like placed me with her, and she's my Italian mama, Annette Hill. I'll never forget her. It's the saddest day when she passed away, but she introduced me to Louise Hay and gave me this book of You Can Heal Your Life. And everything that I do, I think about that moment when she gave me that book, because the questions that I had of like, I live in these two worlds, but I just really want to be me. And I want to know what's inside. And I just want to read you this quote because as you ladies were speaking, I thought, oh, this quote is just so perfect for me and the work that I do. And I'll answer your question, Cathy. This is so poignant, but this is from Louise Hay. I go within and do my inner work. I explore the depths of my heart, my mind, and my consciousness. I forgive myself and others. I allow love to flow through me and out into the world at large. I am a positive presence who helps make the world a better place. I've had this since 2008. And in 2008, she gave this to me, Annette did, and told me I needed to figure out what I wanted to do next. And so I decided to quit my job at the finance firm that I loved and adored, and I still speak to them. And I packed up my bags. I knew I wanted to help people, but I didn't know where to go. So something inside of me kept telling me that Washington, D.C. was the answer. I sold everything that I owned. I packed my VW bug and I drove across the country. No job, no plan. Everybody thought I was crazy. I was like, I don't know what it is, guys, but I'm going to find it there. And then fast forward just a few years later, and here I am, working at nonprofits because that was where I needed to go. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about nonprofits. And I kind of just see myself, continuing to have these shifts that occur in my life. And, today I just stay present. I mean, that's really what I can do in order to be able to move this work forward. I really, a point in my career, what I knew that I was where I needed to be was when one of our biggest funders, in my first trip before going to Malawi, at the time, he was our biggest funder. He asked me what my intentions were when I got to Malawi, a country I only heard of because of a friend. I didn't know anything about Malawi, but I just knew that I was going to go and I was going to learn about this program that I'd only read in books. And I looked at him and I didn't really have an answer, but I thought, it's okay. I'm just going to go with what's telling me inside I need to say. And I said, I'm going on a listening tour. And that's really my goal is I need to learn what's happening. And then I can bring that back and see how I can help, bring resources back to Malawi and to be able to help move this forward. So as I said, I just, my goal is just to always stay present and listen deeply and just let that intuition that has always guided me, not knowing it was, conscious or unconsciously, but that's what leads me forward. So, anyways, it's just been a way that I choose to show up and just always remember those that, really encourage me to go forward. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Thanks, Concepción. Bianca, we'll wrap up this first one with you. Gosh.
Yeah, I know. I was just going, where am I going? So no one becomes a counsellor because their life's rosy. Right? So people become counsellors generally or mental health clinicians because they've had a family member themselves or someone been in deep pain at some point. And I am no exception to that. I don't talk about that my prior life because it's like a different person. It's not even who I am. I don't identify with that person. It's a period of life that I went through, but, abandonment as a child, suicide attempt to escape a DV relationship at 18, those kinds of things, multiple DV relationships, all bring a certain flavour to who you are. But that's, as I said, I don't talk about that, not because I'm hiding it or embarrassed of it. It's just not who I am. It's not who I see myself as and not the way I move through the world. So, turning points. Obviously, the day I woke up after my suicide attempt. And, before that, I never had suicidal thoughts. And after, I've never had suicidal thoughts. It was just a way of my teenage 18-year-old mind thought that was the only way to escape at that point. Anyway, I woke up and I thought, can I swear? I'm just going to say it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, don't. I won't swear.
Yeah.
Yay, I'm alive. How amazing is this world and all the things that are there. And so from then on, I was on this journey of tasting the world and the life and all those kinds of things. Conception, when you talked about listening inside, that's the bit we call it Ngāti Gawanda in Buddy Maya. So listening, feeling, thinking strongly. And I always say, there was a point in my life where it was like the universe said, I used to live in this quite a regional area, and the universe said to me, I think you should move. And this was about 22 years ago or something. I think you should move. And I'm like, oh no, I've got a job here, got my house, we're all here. And then a little bit more intense. I think you should move. I'm giving all these reasons. I'm talking to myself, all the reasons why I'm not moving. And then eventually it was like the universe hit me overhead with a brick and ripped every reason that I had given for staying in this place and said, move. So I moved to Adelaide and live in this beautiful place. And, what you were talking about, I walk in three worlds. My dad was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany as a Ukrainian man and came to Australia when he was young. So in some spaces, I'm Ukrainian. My grandmother on my mum's side basically grew up in an orphanage because her Aboriginal mother, it was very common in Australia where Aboriginal children were taken away and put into missions. She wasn't taken away. Her non-Aboriginal father put her there, but she wasn't able to leave until 18. She was there from 4 to 18. Luckily, we always knew who we were. So I've got those two sides coming in. And then at other times, I'm Australian. So there's always these three worlds, all with different languages, all with different ways of seeing things. Anyway, so I think you should move. So I'm here in Adelaide and I'm going, yeah, okay, I'm here. And then probably the biggest turning point, February 2015, I retired from the Commonwealth Government. I became free after over 2 decades. And I thought, now I can verbalise what I want to do. I can do the things. I'm not governed by anybody. Beautiful. September 2015, I separated from my husband. And then I went, oh my gosh, 2 kids, a mortgage, no income, no savings, and now I'm no longer with my husband. I thought, what am I going to do? And I had 3 people in one day say to me, that thing that you've been doing voluntary, maybe you should do that as a job. I looked at them and I went, maybe I should. So I started my business that day because this is the way I am. I'm just like, yep, great idea, let's go. And then I spent the next few years, studying and doing all those sort of, educating myself further about different options. What the crazy thing was, I come out of that and I went, they've got it all wrong. People are already healed. And I would say to some of my clients, and they'll look at me and go, no one thinks like you. Because I'm going, this is just logical. You're already healed. You're just seeing the muck that you're buried underneath. But you're already healed and whole, and we're born healed and whole. And then I realised that actually people don't talk like that. And I realised, luckily I haven't experienced imposter syndrome. I'm a pretty dominant, strong kind of woman. And so I'm very comfortable standing up to spaces that, are there to to diagnose and put disorders on people rather than looking at our humanity. For me, country, connection, I said learning in stories, those turning points. I used to, when I first, early on in my business, I would have messages from Gammy Winder. So it's a grandmother tree on my property. And I'd be working with someone who'd come to work with me with horses, equine-assisted psychotherapy. And I'd have this picture turn up in my head. And it would be, she'd be coming more and more insistence. Like, I think you need to introduce this person to me, And I used to, and here's the change, I used to be very, like I'd go, oh, I know you're here for equine-assisted psychotherapy, but would you like to go and meet the grandmother tree? This is going to sound a little strange. Now I don't, because that was exactly what that person needed at that point. We have all these answers within us. We see the world through our own reflection, through our own trauma stories. And the turning point was actually embracing and going, people heal differently. People walk through the world differently. Not one thing is going to be the right thing for that person. And so being able to go, I'm grateful the universe ripped everything out from underneath me because I wouldn't be here. And all the people that I've supported and helped around the world wouldn't have had that person. And so for me, it's about, and I agree, Wendy, you aren't your trauma. That is an experience. Even if you're holding on to something that happened, I'm about to turn 53. If I'm holding on to something that happened when I was 18, that's not who I am. And so it's about actually embracing the amazingness in life. And I always go back to all these quotes. Viktor Frankl, there's one part he said, everyone always has a choice. Might not be much of a choice. You can stay in bed and die, or you can get out of bed and live. But it's still a choice. And so every day I wake up, I love what I do, and that's my choice.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. Yeah, I think that's probably it. So I was going to go in a completely different direction until you, Mob, started yarning about stories, and that's where I've gone to.
And that's what I love about the conversation. And if you think about it, we're actually different people from across the world, yet we're actually just speaking so intentionally about who we are wholeheartedly. And they're the things that we're actually missing. And, as I actually look at the time, I think, my gosh, we're actually only at question 1 and we've got a whole series. We could do this for a week with just this panel, right? But thank you to each of you, because what you've actually shared, I know, is going to resonate for somebody somewhere. And that's what this is about. We want to actually allow the conversations just to actually bring light to something that actually gives meaning to somebody else, so that they're not feeling like they're not alone, and they can, So
that's ancestor-led, Cathy. That's that space where you go, I may have a piece of paper with some questions on, but you know what? There's something going on here, and we just need to flow with it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I might actually start, Wendy, with the next question that I want each of you to, perhaps consider. And I'm hoping that everybody will actually stay on, because I think we're going to go a little bit longer than originally intended. But, I'm actually sitting and we're all actually listening without any judgment and actually being comfortable with whatever's being shared. And I think that actually sits at the core of where humanity is going and where we want to actually feel comfortable with. So what does conscious leadership actually require of us right now, especially when it's actually, asking us to be curious, to unlearn, and to actually speak the truth in spaces that perhaps actually are quite uncomfortable?
That is such a profound and necessary question, Cathy, and thank you for the thought you've put into each of these and to collecting us as individuals. I hope that this conversation is beneficial to the others. I know it has been to me. I feel as an American right now in our current climate that there are some things I'd like to apologize for on behalf of my country. But beyond that, I think that conscious leadership at this point is allowing people to have their own space. And I think that not needing to be right when I discuss perhaps politics or other things with people who have strongly different views than my own, or people who are suffering because of decisions that are outside of my control. I think that conscious leadership starts within, and being able to say, I can hold myself in this space without being sucked into your emotional or psychological drama. I could never make it as a therapist like Bianca, because I would be leaning over my desk and grabbing them by their neck and saying, what is wrong with you? As I do to my authors sometimes. But I think that trying to do that when we're in a space of allowing and opening and like Eckhart Tolle says, allowing these pain bodies that other people carry to sort of pass, and just pass like a cloud without clinging to it. I have a parent who is very pro MAGA and wants to expound on the rightness of American political decisions right now. And my job is to just love that person and to consciously remind myself before, after, and during the conversation that although we may be coming from other perspectives, love is the only way to lead and to stay sane in this and every other interaction. And I think that there's never been a greater call. I also am of the probably inappropriate opinion that women have a greater capacity for this, and that we are trained and facilitated in a different way. We know we've talked about people pleasing and all this other stuff. I think that women have a greater or a very large capacity trained into us from an early age for us all to get along. And I think that as women especially, we are called upon in this time of great global distress, national distress, financial distress, etc., to hold our own and to allow people to have their beliefs and to continue to work for what we perceive as the good. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Oh, well, where will we go? How about we go to Concepción? What are your thoughts around this?
You know, I'm with you, Wendy. Thank you. I do appreciate it. I am really sorry, everybody that's outside of the United States. But I think I kind of echoing on what Wendy said, it's really about looking from within. I think that for me, that's just my theme, is really how do I look within and how do I make decisions? And it's really about, sometimes we need to step into our roles with some humility. I know that, being leaders, we all have the answers. We know how to solve the issue. That's why we're there. But really, it's about taking a step back and really listening to what people around you are saying, especially when you're out of your context. I sometimes we get lost in even when people are speaking, you're not really listening because you're already trying 2-3 steps ahead. And so it's a practice, though. Like I believe that conscious leadership is a practice, and every day, how are you going to show up? Are you going to be conscious? I know I do a couple of things before I get on any call, and I take a deep breath. I've actually, Cathy, have incorporated your little nervous, regulating my nervous system with my breathing exercises. So it's taken a little different, but, we don't need to be loud, and it doesn't require for us to like scream our solutions through the rooftops. It's the work. It's just moving it forward and bringing those people along with you. And because we can make unconscious decisions, but being present and staying where we're at will keep us a step ahead of ourselves, at least in being able to be aware of your surroundings and who you're with. That for me is what conscious leadership is, and what is required right now at this moment. I agree with you, Wendy. Sometimes, want to scream from the rooftops at some people that I know that support what is happening right now, but I know that that is not going to take me anywhere. And so I do take a step back and I listen to what they have to say. And sometimes I want to find pain in their voice because it's the only way that I can register it out. But I continue to pray for them, and again, it's just a practice because every time I walk into it, it's what it is. So, thank you.
Yes, the practice of presence. I think I actually say that life is actually about practicing living, and it's being in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Bridget, I might call on you next.
There's two of us using my mute button there. I actually really love where this conversation is going because I think that so many of us have been brought to this moment. I will tell you that I'm a student of politics and a student of history, and both of those things show me that humans just devolve into patterns over and over and over again. But there's something that if you study history far enough and long enough and wide enough, you're able to see that humans obviously are capable of horrific destruction. And we are also capable of incredible enlightenment, opportunity, learning, changing, and evolving. And education is huge in this, absolutely huge. But I also love, Cathy, how your level of leadership is about the listening. It's about coming to the table without this judgment. And I want to share with you very vulnerably my why. I heard Mother Teresa say, I am the pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. And I thought, that's me. Not Mother Teresa, but this pen in the hand of a God. Because like Bianca, I was just so happy to be alive. I wanted to write these beautiful stories of triumph. But like everyone else on the planet, I had my own blinders on, my own lenses. And whenever I held a judgment, God would bring me a story. And I would learn so deeply, and I had no choice but to let go of whatever judgments I might have been holding. And a couple of years ago, I had an extraordinary experience. I put on inspired writers retreats, and it's just small groups of people that come in from around the world, and they're working on their nonfiction stories primarily, a little bit of fiction, but mostly nonfiction. So it's very vulnerable and deep. And imposter syndrome, rears its head with everyone. It's just natural. And this time, I had people that were primarily in the United States, and they were from vastly different sides of the aisle. So everything that you have been seeing in the media had walked into the front room of my retreat. And I just had almost even a hard time breathing. I'm like, God, I know you always bring the most incredible groups together, but I don't know how you're going to do this. And I just kept facilitating and facilitating, but also listening deeply. And here's the cool thing. Being that example of actually listening, not getting up into ire, not getting frustrated, seeing things as they were occurring, but then also digging down deep into story. So these people come Sunday morning, they all looked at each other just with this great astonishment and also love in their eyes. And they said, if I had met you on the street, I wouldn't be able to stand you. But now I know your story. Now I love you. And it's so fascinating because they had moved in the spectrum because of hearing story. And they hugged each other and they have remained friends. And it just blows me out of the water. And that was the same weekend that the Hamas bombed Israel and these horrific things happened. And in one weekend, I saw the full spectrum of what is possible in humanity. And I believe that more of these situations that each one of you brings to the table, your kindness, your listening, like Diana, the kindness and the courage to be kind and not a bully, to hold on to something that you believe in, but still listen to what someone else has to say. And like Concepcion, to learn further about another human being. To me, this is the epitome of conscious leadership. And we've got to get back to the stories and listening to people's stories and understanding them, and then taking steps together to make the world a better place. I see you. I see you. I see you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Bridget. Oh my gosh. I'm so moved, by what you guys are actually sharing today. And I hope that, everybody that's listening is taking that one thing away in, what you've actually just shared and will continue to share. Diana, I might go to you.
Yeah, I love what you were saying, Bridget. I mean, story really has the power to connect. And for part of the mission that we do with my company is always keeping in mind at the back that we want to make the world more united, less divided, because we have more in common than not. And every day our team shows up, asking like, how can we, be the best today to make a positive impact on the world, to create a positive ripple effect. And even though we might not be able to change the world, we can change our world, the world we live in. Yeah. And how we show up is how that impacts others, right? So how we act or react to things. Everybody has something bad happen to them, right? And we could be stuck in that story, or we could be stuck in the story of being our own hero in our lives, how to step into the purpose and the gift we were given, why we came here on this planet, to share that gift and step into our ikigai, right? To help share that gift with the world and make the world better through that. And I actually read another book that impacted me that a friend gave me as a gift was Don Miguel Ruiz's The Mastery of Love, and also The Four Agreements. I can't remember which one I read first, but they both had a strong impact. And it was this idea of showing up and being your own hero, not victim in life, and not to blame others, which is something I think the world is definitely doing right now, is blaming others instead of taking ownership and responsibility for our own actions, right? Like everybody has something bad, but it's how we act or react to that defines us as an individual. And how we show up for others in this world is how we make that impact. And for me, I want that impact to be positive, not negative, and leading through love and light. And again, back to that childhood story of empathy and kindness, right? And living by the golden rule.
Yeah.
So some days it's, we got to be remind ourselves.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, there's a lot going on in the world. It's easy to get on our own soapboxes too, but to go back and listen, have empathy, even when people believe something different than we do, because we're not going to change the world if we can't walk the walk and talk the talk. So it's taking that deep breath and taking it all in, and remembering to go forward with how we show up in the world. Yeah. And again, that ripple effect we want to create. So I try to approach each day, because every day is different with our agency, working on different projects, working with different teams, working with different people. It's definitely not monotonous by any means. And every day I have the chance to show up and have a positive impact in my little world, which hopefully also we're creating messages that go out into the world and impact the world on a larger scale. And I'm always thinking about like how those images that we pick and the words that we use, how those do create impact and ripple effects. So we're, again, going back to mindfulness and marketing, being very conscientious of that power we have and that impact.
Oh, it's so huge. And I don't know that, everybody actually applies that level of consciousness that you do, which is why I actually love everything that you do.
Well, right back at you, Cathy. That's why we're friends. That's why I become friends with a lot of ladies on this panel today, because you collect so many beautiful people and souls into your world. And I'm very grateful for the magic that you create. And when women get together and help each other, magic truly does happen.
Oh, yes. Amen to that. Bianca, where are you at? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I love curiosity and kindness and silence, because sometimes we're thinking about things that actually is nothing to do what the other person is thinking about. And I learnt that very quickly in my therapist journey, was actually maybe I'm thinking something, but that's actually nowhere near where that other person's going. And by the silence, they actually have space to be able to find that.
Yeah.
we're all being programmed from something. Our lives, the way we respond and see the world. This is a lifetime of programming that we're either trying to move through or has contributed to all this thing. So we're all coming from something. You know, we're not clean slates. Also recognising that the other people are actually coming from their own things. People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But also, what are they gaining by remaining with that viewpoint? They're gaining something. What do they gain by changing? And it's quite often when they're actually gaining more by remaining in that space, that viewpoint, that pain, whatever it is, that's going to win out. And so when we recognise that we're all going through the world with our own views, because we're bringing up this whole raft of things that are coming up behind us. So recognising our humanness.
Yeah.
You know, the moment that we go out and we walk on country, on land, and we listen to spirit, our sameness actually, even if they're someone that you wouldn't even go and spend any time with at all, and you suddenly find a little connection. Yeah. And it might be, you know, as you ladies were yarning, it was like there was this message from country. The breeze started blowing really heavy. And the way I look at it, it's that, you know, things come and go and change and flow, and things that we think that are so important today, no one gives a toss about tomorrow. And recognising that stuff just flows. And if we become too attached to one thing, then, or one way of looking or thinking or feeling, then we miss the opportunities that having that interaction with that other person brings us. And so silence for me is super important. And I agree what you were saying before, Concepcion, in the sense of not listening to respond, but actually that might go under that really deep listening with your heart, not your ears. That's the way I move through the world. Listen to what's being said underneath the words. The words might not be actually what they're really wanting to say. And seeing the sameness. Everyone was someone's daughter, brother, son, husband, wife, cousin, whatever. And someone loves them. And so we just come from that, from our humanity, our listening with our hearts. We may not agree with them, and that's okay too, because a lot of people don't agree with me too, and that's all right, because that's our difference. But remembering that when we sit on country, when we actually, I'm looking that way because that's where the valley is and it's looking down, I'm in the trees at the moment, when we realise the sameness and the messages that we get from country, if we just have the courage to listen.
Yeah.
Guess that's probably
Thank
my
you.
answer.
You actually shared something that I guess I often say to people, I've begun to better understand how to listen between the breath in what's actually chosen to be shared with me, but to better understand what is actually meant for me to hear. And that may often actually be unspoken. And that pause that you talk about, the silence, that's actually where I think we hear it the most. And when we're in rooms that we are speaking, you know, a conversation that is uncomfortable, allowing that to happen will actually enable us to hear better or to meet people where they're at. I love the way that each of you have actually shared, you know, a different skill and a different tool that actually enables us to actually come together to accept differences and to actually hear, you know, people in what they're wanting to share. I'm going to ask the final question to each of you, and I might start with you, Bianca. Mm-hmm. You know, we actually really are operating within systems, and sometimes those systems are actually well-intentioned. Yet, at times they are in fact disconnected to where we actually need to be from a humanity element. From your experience, where do you actually see that there are the gaps between these systems and what they actually say that they value to the experiences that people actually have from them? And what are our responsibilities as conscious leaders to actually help bridge those gaps?
Oh, that is such a big question. I mean, they all are, but that one, especially for a therapist, the mental health system is so broken that, we heal in community. Dr. Lewis Malmadrona talks about this, and we heal in community. We don't heal in isolation. But what do we do the moment someone's having a mental health issue? We pull them away from their support networks. We pull them away from community, and we shove them in a space where they're around lots of other people who are struggling, and they lose all of that support. Mental health systems, those systems that I operate in, are actually structured to make it easier for the people that are delivering a service, not actually for the people that are actually hurting. And that's like this, when we start to talk about people's dysfunction, that or their disorder, no, that is something they're experiencing, but that's not who they are. And I think many of these systems have forgotten the humanity. They operate from that expert and broken person, and that does not help people heal. I work with people that have been through all of those systems, have been told by people who should know better that they will never get better. This is their life. And now those people are living calm, regulated, almost joyful lives, just because we talk about relationship. The relationship is missing from those systems, those spaces, and it doesn't help anybody. Certainly doesn't help people who are hurting. And so for me, that's and being very vocal. You're working against a system that goes, let's give them a drug, let's lock them up, and tell them how sick they are, rather than going, I hear you're hurting and I see you.
Yeah,
that's the difference. And many of these people that I work with are no longer on any medication, not because, obviously they're working with their doctors, because they're finally not. I get told by people, you're the first person that looked at us and told us we weren't broken.
Yeah, to Wendy's point earlier, right? Yeah.
Yeah, reminded us who we are.
Yeah.
And that's the important part. Systems are there quite often to keep people in a place, not to help them.
And that's the difficult conversation, because everything is actually about a capitalist environment. And so it's the fastest way,
Fastest way. Yeah, 3 sessions, 5 sessions.
Yep. Yep. You and I, we can talk on this forever. Thank you.
You've spent 40 years being programmed in a certain way and operating, and you want 5 sessions that to be all resolved.
Yeah. Oh, you and I talk the same language. All right. I might jump to Concepción. Where are you with this? Unmute.
There you go. Okay, there's 2 mute buttons, but I hit the wrong one. I work in a space where, so the dismantling of USAID, I think, really brought us to face exactly like what's happening on the ground. We never received funding from USAID, but I did see a lot of people that, that worked in those spaces that unfortunately lost their jobs. But what it taught me was that I had seen this before in my travels for work. But there's often times is that we create these systems to want to hold accountability for people, but we don't invite those people in the accountability process. And what I mean by that is that we're not inviting them to be part of that conversation so that they know what they're being held accountable to. And so that is often, that's where I see the disconnect between very well-intentioned people that show up in a community that they've never been to, but they have the answers, but they engage the people, but they never tell them what they found. And so it makes it difficult for people like me to go into the same community where where we have already built a relationship. And I know some of these people individually. And what I get over and over from them is that everything has to fit in a box. You know, we create these very difficult logic frameworks that everybody has. If it doesn't fit in there, then your program is not doing what it's supposed to do. And so their organization, we've been there 20 years and we've been doing the same things. I have seen the transformation of so many young women in our program. You know, we're not the fanciest with our logic frameworks or our proper language, but you know what? You can walk into any of the communities that we work in and you will find a girl that went through our system, and maybe she doesn't live there anymore, but people remember her. And guess what? She's either, running her own business. She's a doctor. She's a lawyer. She's a teacher. She is the first person to leave that village. And she has left an impression on others, and others see her and they slowly transition and they transform just like her. And then, not to make comparisons, but then there's other individuals that walked under a different system, but you don't know where they are, what they're doing, because everybody was in that box. And so they stayed within that box. And so I just feel like the creativity got lost because everybody was confined to this particular space. And so I hope that we can learn that sometimes it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to be adaptable. It's okay to take a step back and say, well, you know what? They're a little bit unconventional. But you know what I see? I see women from all different walks of life having their life experience. And it was just because of this little opportunity that they were given when they were in secondary school. They didn't fit the box, but you know what? We don't fit the box either. So I think that when I think about the systems, I think we just make them so complicated. Just having a conversation with somebody, bringing the people together, bringing your community and relationships, I think we would just go so much further. And I say this very vulnerably because clearly in the space that I work in, I still have to submit these logic frameworks. But I often think to myself, I'm checking off the boxes, but I'm inviting you to come here and I want you to see what's outside of the box. And so when I think about those systems, that's where I see the disconnect. People don't want to see beyond what they see behind their computer, because they have the data and that data tells them everything. But they're not understanding that behind that data is a name, is a face, is somebody who is clearly, walking this incredible life, and you're missing out on it because they didn't click the box. I hope that that's kind of falling into place here, but so many things very well intentioned just kind of fall through the cracks when we just get confined into our spaces.
You both have actually shared that the system's been created for those that run the system. It's not actually for who they're there to serve. Mm-hmm. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. Diana, where are you with that? Because you work in a massive system.
I do, which is why it probably drove me. I'm a woman who worked in the corporate world, and which is a very male dominated space. And I felt there was a space for, men had their golf courses, right, where they got a lot of business done and they're able to build that camaraderie. And I found that women are so busy getting stuff done. I have an acronym I love to use, WGSD, Women Get Stuff Done. You could use a different word than stuff if you want. But women most women I know are doers. There's always exceptions to rules, so you don't want to say always never. But a lot of women I know are in this category of getting stuff done, and the ones who really are the workhorses of a corporate space, but maybe not always getting the recognition and the leadership opportunities that they deserve. And so maybe because of my own experiences and wanting to also, I love the idea of female camaraderie and helping each other. That's just something that is really a part of who I am. Even I love helping anyone, male or female, to be honest. When anyone's come through who's been a production assistant or anyone coming to talk to me and get career advice, I always ask, like, how can I help you? What's your path to happiness? And how can I help you? Like, what's your ultimate dream? Because I know sometimes when you're coming to work with me, that entry-level position might not be your ultimate dream, but what is your ultimate dream? And how can I help you find a space to that and a step towards that? And whether that, and that's why through Changemakers, it's this idea of helping each other rise, which applies to men and women, but that we are a female focused group, but we know we need our male allies. We're not going to get there alone. And we welcome tickets to men and women who come, but we are definitely focused on helping women rise and helping each other get to those spaces and those places where our voices need to be heard. And to help achieve those goals that each of us have, our own path to happiness. Like, what is that gift we're trying to share with the world, as I spoke of earlier? So I started it, and I was a little nervous because, like, I'm not a guru, right? So how do I lead this group when I don't know, what my story is, not necessarily all the time either that I want to share, or my expertise. But I realized that I don't have to be the guru. I just needed to be the safe container where these conversations can happen, where women can feel it's okay to be vulnerable. They're in a safe place to share. And I realized the one thing with Changemakers that was really setting it apart from other women's networking groups that I went to, which I think are all important, they all have their place, was I wanted a place where women went beyond just exchanging a card, but actually really felt safe and vulnerable to say what they really needed from each other. And that could be professional or personal. And we've done these cohorts where women, we have a chance to mastermind what people are working on and what they need help solving in their life. And some women are looking for a new job opportunity, or some women are, want to launch a podcast or want to learn to write a book. And someone else, is going through something with their daughter who has, a story that I remember, her daughter going through having an eating disorder, and other women helping to share insights and, hope and inspiration for her and tools. And that's something that I really have loved about this group, is that it has become a safe place for women to share and come together and really, truly help each other, and not just give a card, but actually follow through. Like, we often don't realize the power as women we have to help each other, because, again, we're probably so busy getting stuff done. We're not realizing that by taking one extra step in our day, we can actually help change someone else's life for the better. By one email introduction, which, Cathy, you're great at doing. I always love that about you. But one little email introduction took you 2 seconds, right? It can help change someone's complete entire life path. And or even a good book recommendation, as we've been talking about some of the books that influence us, or podcasts that people want to recommend. There's all of these little things that we have access to as knowledge, right? Knowledge is power, right? That we can help share with other people and give other people that access to that knowledge and power to get to the path that they want to be on. And that's something that's really near and dear to my heart, that I'm passionate about, of like how we can all help each other attain those goals and dreams and aspirations. Mm-hmm. And it really is one little thing we do can make that big impact. And when more people are on their path to happiness, they're stepping into their joy, stepping into a place where they're spreading a positive ripple in the world. And it's like, if I can help do that little thing that helps them get into a positive, joyful state as they're, finding their dreams, it's helping in that bigger picture of helping to make the world a better place. And so I'm probably rambling. I'm not even looking at any of my notes. But also, I think there's a huge shift, of wanting to step into the divine feminine, right? And lead with a feminine wisdom that I think is truly important. I once had a boss who was a yeller and a screamer, and it made me like walk on eggshells. Yeah. And I was like the person who graduated first in the class and teacher's pet type. And so that didn't work for me. But for me, like, we actually spoke about it during the course of my time working with him, and we're actually great friends now, and still a mentor and inspiration. But side story, we all got sent to the woods of Kentucky to be in this to learn how military practices are applied to the boardroom, and we were really put on like these missions where we were shot at by paintballs and and we learned about like the things that were shooting at us were the things that are making our day difficult. And so it was how we reacted under stress to the mod of things that made our day difficult is how we were learning what kind of leader we were when we were acting under stress. So ironically, by going through that experience, I was able to come back and talk to him and be like, that you're the person making my day difficult because I'm walking on eggshells and I never know what I'm going to get with you. So I don't work well with yelling and screaming. I'm a positive encouragement person. So through that experience, I learned to use my voice, which was great, and share what wasn't working for me, which was a huge turning point for me. But also, learning that I can do something differently, that there's different ways to lead. And I think stepping into that divine feminine and that wisdom of is more of how I would like to lead in this world and show up in this world. And that doesn't mean that it's only for women to show up that way. That's a way for men to start taking ways of the divine feminine as well to show up. And I think that, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same results. Maybe it's time for some different results by doing something different.
What you've actually shared, and I think we're actually seeing a shift, is breaking the system and actually not doing things the way that it has always been done before. And that actually includes, men are actually being softer, and I love that they're actually able to show up like that and not feel that they have to have this bravado. Thank you. Bridget, how about I switch across to you very quickly? Sorry. Your mic.
Just wanted to say Okay. I just wanted to say I'm just delighted. Like each of you brings such incredible wisdom to the table, and these words keep coming to my mind as I'm listening to you all. And it's for such a time as this. Like all of your experiences and your stories and your ways of evolving consciousness, the divine feminine, the stepping into roles, the recognizing when something needs to be done, for such a time as this. And to have, to be surrounded by women who are aware and awakened and not perfect, but perfectly imperfect is such a pleasure. And the one thing that I would love to end with is, Dr. Frankl is one of my favorite people. And he went through the depths of hell. And when he came out on the other side, he had gifts to share. In the hero's journey, we talk about it as this elixir of life, right? And for a female journey, for a male journey, but there is these gifts to share on the other side. And one of the things he has said that changed my life is he says, when we're no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. And I was working in a nonprofit called She Rose United, and I loved it. And we were in prisons and women's shelters and other things. And we assisted many people through a curriculum that I developed and other programs that women around me developed for women to rise out of victim into victory. And it was just amazing because, as Wendy was saying, things happen to all of us. And if you're a victim, you just think, it happened to me. And when you rise out of that, you say, it happened for me. And then when you get into conscious leadership, you say, I'm bringing it through me. And that's where I feel that you ladies are tonight. You're bringing it through you. And what an amazing, amazing thing. And so now I'm spending my time in the statue of responsibility in my nonprofit work. And it's to Dr. Viktor Frankl said, in the United States, you have all these freedoms, but you cannot have freedom without responsibility. And each of you in your own way has spoken the words of responsibility and accountability tonight. And so this is where my heart is bringing me for such a time as this, And I'm excited to see where you are all going during such a time as this. And thank you, Cathy,
Beautiful.
because I love what you're creating.
You said that so beautifully. You said that so beautifully. Wendy.
Well,
Wendy.
thank you. You guys are a tough act to follow. What a beautiful experience this has been. I hope for those of you who have watched or will watch this, that it has been as rewarding and inspiring for you as it has been for me, and more. And that you'll take the piece that applies most to your situation and be able to build something meaningful to you and the people you love from this. I am in a system, the publishing system, the speakers, education system as it exists in the world, and basically adults educating other adults. And there are a lot of challenges, especially now with AI, which I personally think is an incredible benefit to humanity, but with modification. But that's not the system that really matters. You know, it just happens to be where I happen to be. And what I think is more important is that if you look at, I'm sure you could look at the whole universe as a whole, but if you look at the planet as a whole, all of us are just one little tiny blood cell in this whole body. And it really echoes for me that I am powerless to go and fix the issues happening in Ukraine right now. I have friends in both sides of that, in both countries. I have close friends in both sides. And in the situation between Gaza and Israel, I have deep feelings on both sides. And at the same time, I am just one person living in California, and tomorrow I'm going to sell somebody else's book or somebody else's speech, and that's what I do, and so on and so forth. I can only be the change that I want to see in the world in which I'm currently living. If you're an eye cell, you know, the fact that the body just is trying to repair, a broken toe has nothing to do with me. I mean, I could feel sorry, but I can't really do much. I can write a check, but I can't really do much. I can be a little concerned about the way my government is being run or some other country's government is being run, but I can't do much. To be the change I want to see in the world means showing up in a meditative state with my heart open and my mind open. We've talked a lot about listening. We've talked a lot about healing. Be the change I want to see in the world means try and be the best person I can be today and be an embodiment, a rainbird of love for the people that I encounter in whatever method I encounter them. Zoom call, the girl at the grocery store, whatever.
Yeah.
That's all I've got. That's all I can do. And if we all did that, and we all rode in the same direction, we could create a much more beautiful, abundant, peaceful, fair world for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. You know, our actual ecosystem it's interesting. I think I actually was listening to somebody share with me, maybe it was last week, that they were sharing about speaking on stage, and it was a young person who actually afterwards, because they were talking about conscious leadership, and this young person actually approached him and said, what's the top 3 companies that you actually can let me know genuinely actually have humanity, the planet, at the core of what they do? And he said, and I was stumped. You know, so we're all looking for it. The thing that we can do is actually be who we choose to be to make that change. And then that actually is what the ripple, creates. Thank you, ladies, for actually entertaining me with these easy questions. I'm going to actually ask each of you a question. I'm going to start with Diana. Diana, your work really is actually at the intersection of creativity, culture, conscious impact, and designing something that's unique but very mindful about what that will actually be from a ripple perspective into the world. So what you look at is designing something that's actually possible rather than what has actually been repeated and what already exists. So in your experience, how can storytelling and creative leadership actually challenge the dominant systems while we still actually are creating space for collaboration, integrity, and meaningful change?
No, that's a really great question, Cathy. I feel like our personal mission at my company comes again from my ethos. It probably started in my childhood, right? From every sometimes those traumas create those value systems and how we want to show up in the world. So I go back to my mission, which is be good, do good, create good. That's our company mission. So the be good is like how we show up for each other, how we treat each other as a team, and making sure we're all having a respectful, positive attitude towards each other. Like not that toxic positivity, but it goes back to kindness and the golden rule and treating others like you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And the other part of the do good, we do a lot of, not just through Changemakers, our nonprofit that we started, but we do a lot of volunteer work. So we want to have that positive impact on how we show up in the world. So I work with a lot of animal rescues, and we work with Cycle for Survival, which helps raise money for rare cancer research. And a lot of our team members bring personal missions in that they want to see as part of that do good that we put out into the world. And we try to honor that for all of our team members. So the other part is create good, which is also, it is that literal creating good, which is creating our creative at a premium level that is always going to show up in the world on this really high Hollywood level. But it's also that metaphor of again, that ripple effect that we're creating in the world, that metaphor to create good and have that positive impact. And through that, I worked on the corporate side for television networks, and then went from the client side to the vendor side and started my own company by accident in 2008 as a solopreneur and just worked project by project. I had no capital investment. I just kept reinvesting back into the company. And through that, I was able to make decisions based on integrity and intention, right? So that was really important to me, to be able to not have to work for somebody else and work on brands and things that didn't align with my mission and values. So we purposely seek brands and clients that align well with our values so that we get to feel really good about telling those stories and sharing those stories and amplifying those voices that need to be heard. And I think, we always say we honor each project and bring it to life the best way possible. And that's just such a great way that I get to, an honor and privilege that I have to be able to work on these amazing stories and working with brands that we really align well with a team that I absolutely love and adore, who, no man is an island, no woman is an island. We all need a village behind us to help make it all happen. And I say my team, we all have our superpowers, and we bring to the table, as a superhero team, that we all work together with our special superpower that we all highlight. So it's been a real honor and privilege working with people that I absolutely love and adore every day. And I can't say that more. I probably repeated myself twice because it really is a sentiment worth repeating. And I feel very lucky. And every day we get there, the world is our oyster. We can work with anyone, whatever client we see out there that we, really love and we love their values, we can try to go after them and work with them. And that's the beauty, is anything is possible with how I approach that. I'm probably also going on a tangent because I was also going to talk about mindfulness and marketing again about that. And then also I spoke about this before with how every image we choose, every word we choose really has to be dissected, and which is really important to have diversity at the table, because we all have unconscious bias. So we have to be conscious of our unconscious bias. And we have to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, because even if we have positive intention, again, going back to having a good intention, but even when you have good intention, sometimes you can misstep because you don't understand a word or an image could be misinterpreted by someone else or a different culture that you might not know that meaning or understanding. And it's really important to have diverse voices at the table when you're working on these big campaigns. So I love having, that in my team, that diversity, and having, consultants and other folks that we bring on for special projects, because you really need to make sure, again, you check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's, half of everything is intention and integrity for what we do. And if we can find things that align with that, I think that's half the battle.
I think my latest book is actually called Intentionally Conscious Living. You can be intentional, but if you're not conscious, it doesn't quite get there, and vice versa. So yes, thank you.
Thank you for that book. You need it.
Concepción, if I can actually impose on you, the work that you do is really, I guess, consistently focused on what has actually become possible when we give people the opportunity, a real opportunity, particularly with education and cross-cultural context. From your perspective, what conditions genuinely allow people to thrive, and where do you see systems unintentionally limiting that possibility, even when the actual intention appears positive?
Yeah, thank you, Cathy. We work in a context where, girls' voices are very limited. And so, our organization, Age Africa, really focuses on giving girls voice and making sure that girls are centered and they are, the program is just centered around them, where they have the ability to, to thrive and to be able to make an impact in their communities. And I think that the three conditions that I see for them when I'm there and I get to experience is that, girls thrive when there's agency, there's trust and relationships. There's a space for them that's been created so that they can speak up.
Yeah.
They're trusted in being experts in their own lives, and they're also including in shaping the decisions that's going to impact them later. One of the things that I love to see, and Cathy, I know that you had this experience when you were there, which it's not just the girl, it's everything around her that changes along with her. And what happens, and sometimes, and kind of picking up what I already, mentioned about, these logic frameworks, is that so many people just want to help, and it's so appreciated, but sometimes we get in our own way. And, and I'll say myself included, like sometimes we do it because we're so conditioned to be able to, this is what the funder wants, this is what the donor wants. And that particular system really limits us in being able to carry forward our mission and our work. And so when that happens, you unintentionally are limiting girls' voices, because that feedback that they give you, or that response that you're seeing from something that you're just like, yes, I envision that, like I have this process that I do with myself before I go to Malawi. And by the way, I'm so grateful for all of you to saying divine feminine universe. I love it. It's my language. And I'm just so excited to be in such great company. But I sit there and I do what's called a life vision processing. And what I do is I want to be there and I want to see what that looks like for these girls. And, but even that, I create my own system and I can limit myself. But what's on the ground and what's really happening is that we don't allow for authenticity to be built within our programs, because we're so used to being able to, again, check off those boxes. But what really gave me hope, and the sadness of the dismantling of USAID, I think it's just given us an opportunity to reset that system. I know there are many people that are trying to bring that system back because, oh my God, of all these successes, but nobody's really taken a step back and looked at, like all these unintended consequences, so many systems that were built within the system that 60% of the funds that were supposed to go to the ground didn't make it because of all the other systems that were created, layered and layered and layered, really affects those that are on the ground. And I think that if we don't take a step back and look at it and see what those unintended consequences can bring, I mean, shock to the system, shock to people that live there, you're really missing out on the potential that actually exists within the country. And so for me, just from my experience and seeing where these girls are, I want to be where they're at, because I know that they're the ones that are going to make a difference as they move forward. And I know that the children Like in some of these settings, and I'll be really quick about it. Some of these settings, these girls are outside when they're participating in some of our after school chat sessions, is what we call it, creating healthy approaches to success. And we put the girl in the center. She's the one leading this session. It's not an adult. We train them, we teach them, and that way they can develop and use their voice so that when they, I've seen in situations when one girl maybe didn't want to go to school or her parents forbid her to go to school, our girls will come together and they will go to that girl's house and demand that she return to school. Like nobody teaches you that. You find that within yourself because you've given them voice and you've given them an opportunity and a space to be able to talk about it and then strategize on how you're going to get your friend back and save them from maybe a forced marriage or potentially getting pregnant. And I think that if we continue to put those systems that create unintentional barriers, then I think that the progress is much slower than what you wanted it to be. And then there's those children that are also watching these young girls lead. And what I mean by children, in the settings that we're outside, and so we're in the middle of a village, and all these little kids, 7, 8 years old, are sitting there just watching some young girl speak about leadership, self-awareness, sexual reproductive health, all of these taboo subjects sometimes that we're not allowed to talk about, but you're creating what Cathy likes to say, this little ripple effect that's happening, not just where you're at, but outside in your community. So just kind of going back to the question, I really think that once you give girls, not just girls, even boys, once you give them the space to create and to be able to use their voice to move forward, I think that the system will hopefully readjust itself and to be able to be present and part of this transformation as opposed to stopping it from happening.
I love that you actually shared that story because I actually witnessed that story of, the girls actually being out in the open under, beautiful trees. But there were, 6, 7, 4-year-old children from the village just sitting and observing. And, children do their greatest learning through observation. And by actually experiencing other kids, you're actually giving those young girls agency. And, for me, everything is actually about sovereignty. And when we can give them agency, we get them sovereignty. And that's, for me, where the gap actually really exists. And the system doesn't cater for that. So thank you for actually sharing.
Thank you.
Wendy, if I can actually jump to you, you really have you shared a little bit right at the beginning about what you've been able to achieve, not only for yourself, but for others. You've built this remarkable body of work, with the books that you've actually brought into the world. And you have spent, decades actually helping others share their stories with honesty and with courage. From where you sit today, what does it actually truly mean to speak with integrity, especially when fear, grief, and social expectations actually encourage silence instead?
Thank you for this whole thing and for that very important question. Oftentimes, I've sold about 2,000 projects around the world now, and no matter how famous or noted the author is, I've had Nobel nominees and famous business people and university chancellors and professors and all this other stuff whose books I've sold or who have come to me to talk about a book. And many times they have imposter syndrome, believe it or not, or they have the opposite. They know everything. There's no room for growth. And God damn it, they're going to shove it down your throat, whether you like it or not. And neither one of those is really conducive to being a successful author, especially with the cherry on top, which is, this is going to be a New York Times bestseller if you're smart enough to represent me. I don't actually take new clients anymore. I've retired from that part of the business in July, so I'm not looking for new clients. but I have been doing a lot of work helping in coaching and consulting and teaching and whatever. If somebody's listening and they want to connect with me, I'll be happy to help you. Just come to LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. But what I find is that if you approach a creative work like a nonfiction book, which is all I know, I don't represent biographies and memoirs. Go to Bridget for that. I represent only people who are writing about their body of knowledge, therapists and politicians and all of this stuff. But if you're coming with a book, the number one thing you can do is come with a beginner's mind. The publishing industry will work, and speaking and consulting and coaching, all the things that come from it that I teach, all of these will come from a very different place than you think they will. Your first clients and your most success and the publisher who buys the book, it doesn't work like whatever you saw in some movie or your friend had, and or the story some stupid self-publishing company sells you on. Hey, 90% of our clients become New York Times bestsellers. That's a lie. If somebody's asking you for money for the privilege of publishing your book and they're going to give you 50%, there won't be 50%. There's so many criminals and liars out there. So the way to come at this model is your knowledge has value. There are guaranteed people out there who have not heard what you've got to say. And there's guaranteed that people are out there who've written some or all, or who speak on some or all of what you want to say. So by being in beginner's mind, you can look at it from the opposite perspective. You can say, what would I know if I didn't know anything? What would I want to know if I didn't know anything? And you can also say, what did I know when I didn't know anything? Like, what were the first things? What were the building blocks of what I've learned in this massive career? You can't write a book. I couldn't write a book about everything I've learned from the day I started selling screenplays to today when I don't even sell books anymore. And I've had 19 New York Times bestsellers. I couldn't put it all in one book. So coming at it from beginner's mind, do I want to reach the heart and soul of people who are scared about doing their first book, or people who've had 15 books, or who are successful speakers or consultants or doctors or whatever they are? Where are they coming from? How can I bring myself and think about my audience instead of about what I want to shove into the world? Where can I come from humility so that these people can follow a path that will lead them to the success? Because people buy nonfiction books for one of four reasons. They want inspiration. Maybe you can be a better parent or lose 50 pounds in 20 days or whatever they're pitching, right? They want inspiration. They want education. They want information, like Bridget talked about history. I read lots of history books. That's information. I'm not going to go back and fix Henry VIII's problems with women, right? So they inspire, educate, inform, and entertain. Those are the four purposes of communication. So if you want to be successful as a speaker or an author, you have to come and say, which of these is important? And what do I have to share that I could do it with humility and awareness of the other person's point of view, so that you can give them what they actually need, as opposed to coming down and from Mount Olympus and shoving it down their throats? Because those are the books that fail. The ones that come from openness and kindness and love and awareness are the ones that succeed. That's what I got to say.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And I feel like everybody has a chance to share, even if you don't become a New York Times bestseller, which most people don't. Even if you don't become hugely famous, the process of writing it, the process of relearning it, the process of revisiting the stories that brought you to where you are, those have great value to you and other people who read it and connect. It's the same as listening to or speaking at one of these events, being on a podcast, being on a TV show, whatever. It's all the same. We're all experiencing the same stories. Your job as a human is to learn what you can and share what you can. The end.
Yeah. I love that final piece. It is to actually learn what you can and share what you can. To me, one of my biggest gripes is, why do we actually need patents? If we actually had an open mind,
so
to
agents
share
can pay their
knowledge,
bills.
But we don't need them in the medical industry. We don't need them if we're actually evolving, share the knowledge. That's where I come from. If we're sharing knowledge, let's share knowledge. We want to actually ensure that we give access to people that don't have access. Anyway, I understand the bills part. Bianca, if you don't mind, I'd like to actually ask you, something that I think that you and I have actually talked about before, but you actually work in an area that actually bridges, the Indigenous wisdom with conscious leadership and healing. And we actually know that there are many cultures that have actually long understood balance, harmony, and the connection, yet modern systems have actually overlooked that sort of knowledge. What do you actually believe we have forgotten, and how we might actually reclaim that sort of wisdom so that we can bring about the change and actually lead, heal, and actually relate to one another today?
Absolutely. Right at that time, my internet decided to do its own little thing. But firstly, a different perspective. In my view, we don't give agency or sovereignty. People already have agency and sovereignty. We need to just get out the way. That's our job. Get out the way so people can actually express their own agency and sovereignty. That's another viewpoint. But we have, and this is obviously my perception and the way I see the world, and everyone sees the world differently. In my view, we have this perception that we're separate, that we are individuals going about our lives on this planet. The way I see it is that we are actually part of this living, breathing organism, which is life. We are interconnected to everybody, to country, to spirit, to birds, to rocks, to land, to oceans, waterways, sky. We are actually part of this living, breathing ecosystem of life. And when we start to actually operate that way, we aren't separate. So, when people go, feel really lonely and alone, if you had a slight shift and go, actually, one, be a little bit creepy, I'm never truly alone because I'm actually part of something. And we can see this when you can feel someone else's energy. I can sit on a Zoom with someone in the UK and I'll go, whew, you've got something heavy on your chest because I know this isn't mine and I didn't have this when I arrived. And they'll go, oh, yes, it's so heavy, it's crushing. And then I'll feel when it lifts. If I was separate, I wouldn't be able to feel that.
Yeah.
And so there's this perception that we are separated. And also, Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people and First Nations peoples, we're just closer to our history and our ancestry. Everybody had some form of connection to country, no matter where you're from. And so part of my thing in systems is about remembering our connection. It's already there. We just have to remember. We have to dig down and actually remember who we are, what we're here for, and how we're all connected to everything. And then that changes the way that we work with country rather than sitting on top of country, or how we work with community rather than seeing ourselves as separate. So that's, for me, the really short answer is remembering that we are actually part of this living, breathing organism of life. We aren't separate from each other. And maybe that's the way that we try to remember not to hurt each other, because we're actually, when we lead with that heart-centered space, we're actually just hurting ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually so powerful, Bianca. I think when you're actually in that situation and the behaviour is actually something that isn't who you are, that sits with you.
Oh, yes.
Right. So, yes.
When I wasn't my best self at that point.
Exactly.
And you hold it like a wounding and you go, oh my gosh, and why? Because I wasn't authentic. I wasn't being, it wasn't holding my integrity. And for me, that might have happened when I was like 10 years old, but I brought it forward going, oh my gosh, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
So release that. But yeah, remembering that we are all interconnected.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely love it. Bridget, if I can actually come back to you, you actually touched on a personal story right at the beginning. And in so many ways, it's actually reshaped the way that you actually see yourself and humanity. And you speak so powerfully about change and changing the stories that we actually live by. In a world that has actually been shaped by fear, labels, and inherited narratives, how do we, consciously rewrite our actual story without actually denying what it is that we've actually been through and what responsibilities actually come with that choice? You might be on mute still, Bridget.
I'm doing the same thing as Bianca was. Such a powerful question. And so I want to share briefly, because I know our time is up, but I will say this over and over and over again. I see incredible patterns in people. And yes, Bianca, we are so connected. And what happens to one of us happens to all of us. So we learn from stories, and Cathy and I talk about the power of stories all the time because we're seeing it in media like crazy. Many of you probably know that the media has been so connected to our phones and to our screens and other things that if we have a predilection for something, it will suddenly show more of that and can actually be anti the other side if we're not careful. So I did an experiment and I said, okay, there's so much going on in the world. I'm going to take a look at a couple of these videos and this viewpoint and perspective because I want to understand way over here. And then suddenly I'm being fed all these stories, all of these products, all of these perspectives. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, now I want to see this same topic from a different perspective. And so I looked at a couple of things that came up or that someone brought to my attention. Suddenly I was fed all these things. I found my ire coming up, my frustration, my angst, all of these things. And I was like, okay, interesting. On any side or anywhere in the spectrum, I can be fed stories. And, Wayne Dyer said a few years ago before he passed, he's like, there's more information available today than of all of human history up to a year ago. And then that quickly became 6 months. And then suddenly it has become, we're overwhelmed with information. And he said, do you want to be full of information or do you want to be full of inspiration? And that got me because I have discovered that we all have a beautiful gift of intuition. And oftentimes when we're bombarded by stories, which is what all of media is, it's what all of propaganda is, it's what all of marketing is storytelling. And some of it's more effective than others. But what are we moved by? And what do we allow ourselves to be moved by? And then what are we telling ourselves about our own stories? Because our own stories are the most important stories. So I'm going to be vulnerable for just a moment and then close. I found out who my birth parents were. And I'd been a secret for over 50 years. I didn't know what my true heritage was. So it was kind of cool because I could put on any crown and hat and, make up stories in my own mind when I was a child. But I could experience different cultures without bias. I could just love that culture and bring a little piece of it with me when I would visit Ireland or Africa or India and just enjoy, not knowing where I came from. Then suddenly I am no longer a secret and I find out where I come from. But even there were twists and turns because who my birth mother thought was my birth father was not my birth father. It was a date she'd been set up on, a one-time thing, and she had a drink with dinner and an after-dinner drink. And I came from that. So I want you to imagine there's certain stories you've been telling yourself all your life, and then all of a sudden there is a new story. And I share this at the end of my retreat in a lot more detail because I got to the point where I had fallen in love with my birth mother, and through story had fallen in love with who I thought was my father, and then who I discovered through the DNA was my actual birth father. And then whatever this conception moment was it going to define me? Was it going to oppress me? Was it going to shame me? I had all kinds of questions and then all kinds of curiosity and discoveries. And here's the thing is that you will be programmed as Concepcion talks about, you will be bullied. You will have all of these experiences and so many labels thrust upon you that at the end of the day, what stories are you going to tell yourself? And what stories do you decide to present to the world? And especially and most important, or what are the chapters of your own life that you are going to write for your future? Because that's what really matters. And I love what Wendy said in regards to break it down. You know, Wendy, you're really good at let's just shut the ego down and let's come to this place. I'm a tiny person, and 100 years from now, this may not even matter. And I will tell you one thing. When you do that, you take out all the ego, and then you say, who can I serve today? Who can I share with? Who can I love so much that there is an impact, that this ripple effect, Cathy, that you have been talking about? Our stories impact one another in significant ways. And the listening is another sort of impact. And then connecting heart to heart and then saying, how can I be of service? And who can I be tomorrow and a year from now? Because I keep my heart into this place of soul sovereignty, my own divine feminine, listening not to information, but inspiration. And now what am I going to do with it in my ikigai, right, Diana? What am I going to do in the center of all the things that make me me and glow and shine and be who I am in the world? And I just want to thank you, ladies, for being that exact beautiful gift and that you have expressed this tonight. Thank you. And Cathy, thank you for bringing us all together. I just appreciate you more than words.
You know what? My heart is full. I don't even know where to go from here, but you have all actually given so much of the whole of you, over these last 2 hours. It is such a gift to actually sit in this space and to actually honestly walk a very small path of your journey. I can't tell you what a privilege it actually is. So thank you to each of you, and thank you to, everybody who has actually still stayed online. I know that a few people had to actually go and will come back and watch this when we put it up on YouTube for access. But there has been so much that I've actually taken away, and I hope that you too, are able to take away one piece that's actually resonating for you today. So, we start this series with awareness to actually take action. And it is about navigating through a very complex world, but doing it with intention and being conscious around what that actually means for you. So as we actually genuinely come to a close of this first conversation, what really, really stands out for me today is that today's conversation actually wasn't about any one discussion. It was really about giving the opportunity to listen and to be present. I think a few times, you've actually shared, you listened to what somebody else was saying and something else actually, came up for you or resonated for you. And so therefore it took you into that actual direction. That's presence, that's staying with where we actually are during these conversations. So take that into the world, into your community. I am very grateful. Each story has actually really reflected a very small moment of perhaps what has been experienced and no longer was actually fitting into life. The story really was about moving away from the autopilot and actually choosing where is it that you want to actually be and lead in life. Conscious leadership isn't actually about doing. It's actually about being. And I thank you, ladies, for being exactly who you are and for being here today and giving the whole of you. For anybody who's actually going to be listening, as you reflect on the conversations that have been shared today, consider where awareness already is for you and what it's asking of you to actually act differently, to make that conscious choice about where you want to be, who you want to be, small or large, whatever that is for you. And to you ladies on our panel, honestly, you are a gift. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for actually taking the time to actually be exactly who you are and to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you so much. This is beautiful.
Thank you to everyone who's listened. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you,
this is
ladies.
excellent.
Now,